When we left Chicago, I remember his bouts with conscience. He was very depressed that he hadn't been more forceful in his nonviolence.
I will continue to work against violence and riots with all my might, that it is just as important to work passionately and unrelentingly to get rid of the conditions that bring violence into being.
Do I sense that it is your feeling that the civil rights movement, as a movement, has entered a sort of a different stage?
I said, wait a minute, you're doing better than anybody else is doing. There's no reason for you to feel guilty, but he always felt he was not doing enough.
It was easier to integrate public facilities. It was easier to gain the right to vote because it didn't cost the nation anything. And the fact is that we're dealing with issues now that will call for something of a restructuring of the architecture of American society. It's going to cost the nation something.
As much as he did, he always blamed himself for not doing enough. He was a kind of workaholic where he was never content. He was driven by a kind of a need for perfection. And he was always feeling that he wasn't doing his best. I think because of his feeling that somehow he wasn't good enough to be the leader. Those were periods when he was really just physically exhausted.
Dr. King came to New York with great regularity, and whenever he was here on quiet time, he often stayed at our home. And we also made sure that his space was filled with the things that brought him pleasure, including his favorite drink, Bristol Cream Sherry. I think one of the things that attracted him to my environment was that here I was, a very prominent Black American. And my wife then was a young woman named Julie Robinson, who was white, and that she and I were married and brought children into the world. And at no point was her presence in my life ever obscured. And Dr. King watched the environment around me accept that and treated us with a lot of kindness and respect. In Martin's earlier life, in his youth, as a student, his first real love was a white woman. He adored this young lady and was deeply pained when the wrath of Daddy King and everybody else came down on him when he suggested that he wanted a relationship with this young lady. It betrayed everything that Daddy King had in mind for his son.
It's rare, Doctor, that we get a chance to see you in New York. You've discovered it's a fun city?
Well, I haven't quite discovered that side of New York.
Right.
Being a Baptist clergyman, they keep me involved in other areas.
Right. Your home is actually in Atlanta.
Atlanta, that's
Atlanta,
right.
Georgia. Do you have a church at this time in Atlanta?
Yes, I am the co-pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, and my father is pastor, so we are working together there as a team.
Both you and your father?
That's right. They put up
Is there any
two
seniority?
Well, he makes it clear, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, that he is the pastor.
Right.
And I'm the co-pastor.
Jesus was the leader in the way, for he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now that gets all of it.
When I met Daddy King in Atlanta, I understood the real meaning of patriarch. He was a huge force in the community as a black minister.
Glory to God.
Very imposing.
Something wrong with your head.
And when you met him, you understood that you were dealing with the power. What was also fascinating for me was the subservience that Martin reflected when talking with his father. Not just parental, but as someone whose view of where we should be going as a people held great substance for Martin.
Martin really understood his father, but he understood also the difference between he and his father.
So in a sense, we look into a future shrouded with impenetrable uncertainties.
There was a great difference between he and his father's preaching. Martin made his points at a different level and in a different way than most other preachers did. And the reason for that is because he had this unusual education.
Dr. King finished high school at 15. He finished Morehouse at 19. He finished seminary at 22, his PhD at 26. He knew the strong minds break strong chains.
I think his faith in the teachings that he had studied, his constant reference to Thoreau, and I never knew of these guys, never heard of these people, till Martin came in one day, and in the midst of some rather casual moment, he would evoke what Nietzsche said and what Thoreau, and I'm sitting there saying, well, who is Nietzsche? Daddy King used to say, just get in there and talk the gospel. Stop all with this college stuff and all these highfalutin people you keep evoking. People don't know who they are. He says, yes, they do.
You could wake Martin up from a nap and he could do a sermon. I remember saying to him, you will do it the church in 20 minutes. I mean, like his mother. And when he got to the church, you would think he'd been studying all night. He was a natural preacher.
Everybody loved Martin as soon as they heard him. There was a desire for people to be a part of an educated ministry. The only thing that we had was Christianity. The only thing that white America allowed us to have was our churches.
Martin's moments when the curtain was drawn and he was not on public display was a man who revealed his deepest concerns about his right to do what he was doing. The fact that he was touched by that calling in history disturbed him because he didn't quite understand it. He referred everything to divine intervention, to divine power. It's what God has called on me to do. And in the depth of that belief, that religious commitment, those voices that he heard really existed for him. Daddy King, I don't think, was fully approving of where the movement was going. He saw nothing but chaos. He saw nothing but rage. He saw these young people with the birth of SNCC and the kinds of passion that poured forth from these young people, many of whom were not much younger than his son. And the fact that his son was the spearhead of it was even more threatening for him.